it's almost like some people call it a love letter to Saudi, and I love that term because it sort of captured actually I think the Saudi before, now we're in a different Saudi, I think.
Hello and welcome to the Mayman Show. We're coming to you from our studios in Riyadh, the capital of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And today we have a very special guest and a good friend of mine who is a Saudi-born American creative director and producer. We have Todd Nims. Thanks for being with us, Todd.
It's great to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Hey, anytime. And Todd, you have had a long and extensive, I think pioneering would be a pretty humble way of putting it, experience working in the cinema production and content industry here in Saudi Arabia before it was relatively even popular. Let's start off with your latest project that you're working on. So you're working on a project called Historia.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Historia, I'll start with the meaning of the name. It's a word that means, it's spelled Haustoria. It's a word that means the roots of a parasitic plant. Okay. That kind of specialized roots that go in and suck the nutrients from a host or something that's hosting. The film is... it takes place on a post-apocalyptic film. The genre is a sci-fi psychological thriller where these four strangers, all of them from different parts of Saudi Arabia, wake up on this or come to consciousness on this island in which they must assert themselves over how to survive. And in the middle of that, as they're sort of kind of clash and start to come apart, we have a fifth character, which is a plant that is an otherworldly, strange plant. Okay. That in which they start one by one hearing a voice from their past, each of their life before the apocalypse, separately, and that starts to intervene and interfere and get in the middle of that dynamic.
Okay. So being born in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, you were born in the Eastern Province.
It's true. I confess guilty. Yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit about what it's like growing up?
I mean, Dhahran is where I was born. That Dhahran Hospital. Woohoo! To anyone who's out there, born in Dhahran. And as those who are from the area, they know Dhahran is Aramco. My father worked for Aramco. I was there from a young age till about 5. We left for 5 years, came back during the Gulf War. Was there for Scuds and all that kind of great stuff, gas masks, and like most people, went away for boarding school at 15. So then I would visit all the time up and through college, and then that was it. You can't come back after that. So I wasn't back in Saudi for years. It was only when I made a movie about Saudi Arabia that I was, after we screened it a bunch in a few different places in the States, I was eventually invited back to Prince Turki Al Faisal to show the film in Riyadh. It was one of the first public screenings in I think 30 years or something.
And I think that what was that movie or what was that project called?
That was called Home: The Aramco Brats Story.
Yes, and can you tell us a little bit about that project? I mean,
sure.
Because it was kind of something that was new, and at that time, not a lot of people would see this kind of storytelling and material, develop or be created about the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is. We had no funding for it. So initially what I did is there's these big reunions of people like myself that grew up in Saudi, like Aramco brats, we fondly call ourselves. Yeah. And they're all self-organized. And we had a big one in Houston. And so we got the idea we're going to film people's experiences, tell the story, our story. Mm-hmm. And so it's the film's really Saudi Arabia, but through the eyes of expats that grew up there.
Okay.
And we did so. We filmed everything, and then when we were filming it, we would do is we would have people pre-purchase a DVD of the film.
Okay.
So that's how we kind of started funding the film, we also asked them if they have any footage of their life in Saudi Arabia. So we collected all that footage, and then we posted the trailer online. This was PayPal had just come out, and then we had a link to pre-purchase the DVD on through the trailer, and then through the trailer being online, that's when it was kind of noticed by other people, a group called Friends of Saudi Arabia. So through, I guess you could say, the reason it was so different is because I think it was from the heart. This film, it was all, we really kind of bootstrapped it and did it, and it kind of came out of nowhere. And I think that even when we screened it, because we did a crowdsourced screening in Hollywood at the Live and Done Theater, even there, I mean, I remember we had Kim Tadeo, who was one of Robert De Niro's executive producers. She was next to me and she was crying, like her eyes out, when she saw. She's like, I had no idea that there were even Americans over there and they thought this way. And it was just a real eye opener, I think, for Americans to hear about this country they had been hearing so much bad things about because of 9/11. And then the flip side of it was when we were invited to screen it eventually in Saudi, in Riyadh, we had Saudis also going, because when we screened in Riyadh, not everyone's even familiar really so much with Aramco and all this kind of thing. And I think they were just blown away that expats had felt this way and had this experience of Saudi that they weren't really, I think, probably too used to reading the outside papers and thinking everyone just looks at Saudi in this bad way. So I think it was very eye-opening, and that was why it was such an important film, and why it was something I think that turned a lot of heads.
All right. And during what year was the movie screened in Saudi?
2007, twice actually. 2007 was a very kind of a high-level screening, and then February 2008 is when we had the big public screen, which I think we had like 1,000 people show up. It was packed. It was like standing room only to that.
All right. I mean, and obviously during that time, we didn't have an existing cinema in Saudi Arabia.
No.
And then
it was banned actually. Yeah.
Yes. So how was the experience? Like, I mean, of course, we came a long way, but how was the experience just getting this stuff on to get public viewing?
I mean, it was there really weren't any outlets to. It was that one screening. We were fortunate because it was the King Faisal Center for Research in Islamic Studies. Prince Turki Al Faisal I approached him and said, "Can we do this public screening?" And he said, "Sure." And then we kind of talked about it in the papers, and so I was very fortunate in to have the support there to do that. Past that, to get it out, I remember there's a very long. The story is I ended up going to NBC, but in Dubai, and it was after. There's a really funny story behind it, but I think for sake of time, I won't tell the whole story. But I ended up at NBC doing their Al Arabiya, Good Morning Al Arabiya, and afterwards I approached the head of NBC and said, or the head of Al Arabiya, and said, listen, this movie, I think you guys should basically license it. And so they didn't give me much, but they finally agreed to they took it, and I think they had a license for like 3 years. So they played it, I think, once or twice a year for a few years, and that was great because I think a lot more people got familiar with it through that. Other than that, it was DVDs. People would buy DVDs.
Yeah, and how many DVDs did you guys end up selling? You think?
I don't know. Ultimately, I mean, I know a lot of schools, like a lot of Saudi schools. I mean, a lot of schools back in America, they were screening it. Probably though, all in all, maybe a few thousand. It was never probably, I'm not sure, maybe total 5,000, 6,000.
Yeah.
I'm not actually sure how many we ultimately sold. I mean, we did, I'd still love to see that film. Actually, I was love to see it go to Netflix or something these days. I'd practically give it to them if they ask me
if they take it, huh?
Yeah, why not? I mean, it's a great film. I'm so proud of it.
Yeah,
it's a good film.
I mean, it was a first in terms of creating long, lengthy video content of any kind for the country. So, and so like aside from basically the viewing that you had in the US and in Saudi, did you guys end up sharing it across any film festivals or anything at that time?
Yeah, I mean, we also did a big screening in DC, I remember, which was very well attended, and we did one in Houston, and then we what happened is I ended up staying. I was the one responsible for getting it out there and getting it to places, and we did try to apply. But in the middle of all that, I got into doing the comedy scene here, and I kind of got caught up in that and didn't keep pursuing getting the film out there because we were just, I was just busy kind of doing the next thing, which was kind of doing the comedy, working with these comedians. It was a new underground scene here. And that became the foundation for the YouTube scene that, all these stand-up comedians that were first doing all their sets in English with the international comedians we were working with. And then eventually started doing them in Arabic. All the Saudi comedians started doing them in Arabic. And that was your Fahad Bateri, your Ibrahim Kharela, your Mississippi Ibrahim, your, countless others, Muayyad, and
I know there's plenty of them now.
Yeah. Omar Hussein was another big one back then.
Yeah.
There was,
it was like kind of one thing that I noticed was the youth of Saudi is going through a renaissance, and then
it was,
and then at that time, everybody didn't mind trying new things. You yourself, the reason why I was talking about content and production in general, because it was not necessarily just cinema. You took that that passion and talent and wanted to work on other things. And hence you started working with the underground comedy scene which ended up morphing into the YouTube content that we see today, and I believe that one of them was a lot of the work that you did was had contributed to starting Tilfaz.
Yeah. Actually, funny enough, Ali Kelthami and I met at an interview at NBC, which I know you were working at before, and he was actually just a translator. He was an IT guy at the time. So we were...
he was filling in as a translator.
Yeah, he was. And we just kind of hit it off. And so we hung out all the time. As I know the first time you and I met, we were sort of, we were meeting up at the next, just a compound, and he was with me.
Yeah.
So we were just hanging out. But I think was bringing him on to these comedy shows. And then let's start working with these actors. And the first thing we did together was this sort of youth comedy series pilot that we created that, was just this, it had Fahad Bateri and Ibrahim and all these. It was their first time to do anything. It was a lot of ours first. And again, we scrapped together all that was just like no one was paid. We scraped all that together just on our own with like borrowing cameras and all this kind of thing. And, that was something that it was about these 4 loser friends in high school that failed at everything they did.
I remember this project.
Yeah, almost. It was called Takriban.
Exactly.
And that was what made that amazing is we did the first like casting calls on Facebook, and they were public. I remember we got busted by the Haya at we did this big casting call in Holiday Inn over by Granada Mall, and
at that time it was something unheard of. It was something unusual.
People did. It was the first time we didn't get. I say we didn't get busted. We were doing our casting, but all the women that came had to go home because the Haya were not having.
It was like okay.
That's what started Saudi Casting. They got their first gig through that. And then it was the first time we did one of these shows, and I think it was like the first real fully Saudi produced local thing. We screened it at one of the big comedy shows, and we had a good reaction. But again, then I kind of got stuck out of the country, and we just left it. And then the next thing started Ali and Ala, and they did that Curie commercial.
Yeah.
But then when I got back, we just started filming La Ikhtar. We did the second episode at my house. But that was when I started working with Aramco and moved on to my film producer position. So, I was there earlier days. I came up with the Creative Culture Catalyst, the name, because that was what we used to talk about was catalyzing a creative culture here in Saudi.
Okay. And
we take these, Ali and I take these walks around the block, and a lot of what we talked about was, I would always talk about, because I was always interested in generating what we are seeing, this kind of, how do we create these kind of movements, and I was always looking about like Saturday Night Live and these kind of like, John Belushi, and they were part of that like other little group. They used to, or you have like these other, what were those guys at the time? The Ben Affleck and Matt Damon and the guys that did the Mall Rats and all that stuff.
Yeah.
It was sort of what I was always promoting is like all those things start with like a few people getting together, and then they start just putting each other in each other's things. And like with this little scene, like what we kind of have with the comedy stuff, we need to keep growing that and have these sketch things and have things where we build this and grow it. And I think that's what the YouTube shows started allowing us to do along with the comedy. And I think it's grown up a lot. I mean, I think now all this is rolling into now what will become our cinema industry here, which is exciting. But yes, I do think it was an exciting time, and that eventually that did become the C3 eventually launched Telfaz. By that time I had given away my shares. But I'm really happy that it became such a success. I mean, honestly, and I still see those guys today, and I wish them nothing but the best. They're doing a great job, and yeah, it's awesome to have been a part of something that's become so big. And
You've worked on other projects that kind of helped shape the basically the ability or to showcase what cinema, our Saudi cinema, can do. You worked on Jude,
yeah,
and
that was a big one.
you worked on another pioneering project, which is Born a King.
Yes, another big one. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little about each project, what your role was?
Sure.
And especially since they came out at different times,
Mm-hmm.
you can kind of also give us like a good example of just how each one kind of helped mature the industry and how also executing it varied.
Yeah. So when I was hired by ISRO, came to Cinema World Culture, it was to develop the first cinema and the programming, and one of the things was to do a film that ended up being Jude. And Jude was, I think, is still something I wish would go fully to cinemas. It really hasn't done a full round even to this day, but it's been in ISRO cinema for a while. But I think pioneering project. I was the producer on that. I did all the also formed the story along with Abdullah Yaf for the film, and the whole way it's structured and the format and the concept. We worked on that together. But the whole thing, the beauty of Jude is that it's really one of these rare categories, these kind of almost experimental film categories, the kind that you have. There's maybe 7 or 8 other films like this in the world where there's no words. They're really high concept. They're usually based around the title, and beautiful soundtracks, original music.
Yes.
And these larger than life concepts. I mean, Jude is a word that literally means kind of giving when you have nothing else left to give.
Okay.
And then we structured the film off of this ancient Arabic poetry, the tradition of the Qasida. These 7 of these Qasidas are hammered to the the Kaaba, right? And I think that the fact that this thing was slices of life all over the kingdom, and we took us about 2 full years to do it. When we actually started from the scouting and then finally we took about a year of filming. And yeah, I think it's a master. I mean, it's a beautiful film. We shot in IMAX quality, and the soundtrack we did with the Saudis and the London Contemporary Orchestra. So it's just I think it was a stake in the ground for Saudi cinema, because I think it showed how it's almost like some people call it a love letter to Saudi, and I love that term, because it sort of captured, actually, I think, the Saudi before. Now we're in a different Saudi, I think. And it sort of was the last part of that Saudi. And there's so much beauty in that Saudi. And that Saudi's still there, but now it's morphed into something. It's going
evolved.
into it's evolving.
Yeah.
But I think it does capture a time and a place. And the whole thing's really about the cycle of life, but in verse. It goes from death to birth. And I think, it's something for those who see it. I think it's touching. And I hope other more people get to see it. So I think that was something that said, hey, this is something that's serious that can come from Saudi. As far as a film, I think it was very well received internationally. We did take it to Cannes and screen it, and it was very well received there. And then, Born a King, of course, was a monumental project as well, because that was really the first Saudi story that I think has been done on a big scale. It was a $20 million film.
Okay.
With international actors, but also local Saudi actors, and I think pioneering as well. The way there was so many firsts that had to be done for that. The casting alone, just to find people. Luckily, when I was at ISRO, we had done a lot of programs where we had the National Youth Theater and did a program to develop actors. So we did pull a little bit from that, but also there was just a lot of taking people that had never acted before and doing hundreds of, thousands actually of casting calls, where we just, of people coming through the casting calls, which we did many casting calls, not unlike we did for Almost, where we just took so all that experience paid off, and the way to kind of hold those and get fresh faces, and then also reaching even back to the States and getting people from there and other places in Saudi, the diaspora of Saudis everywhere, to kind of come together. And 3 weeks of that was shot in Saudi. That was, I remember, like one of the examples of that, Nebraska Films. They had never. We kind of found, or we were scouting a location, and they said, "Oh, can we show you our studio?" We sort of found these guys. They had all this equipment. They hadn't done anything with it yet. So it's sort of like a good first break for them to do their thing.
Okay.
So, I mean, I just think it was a win-win for everyone involved. And the story is an important story because it's an important part of Saudi history. But I loved how it was kind of like a King's Speech in the sense of, it took this moment at a time. It gives you a window into this person's life, King Faisal, but at the time, Prince Faisal. And also, a little bit of Abdulaziz's life and showing him on screen, but as a young Abdulaziz, I think was something new.
Yeah.
And, just the fact that could be done, I think it's sent a message, cinema's here in a big way. And that was, of course, by the time we were done is right when the Saudi Film Council was formed. Well, we hadn't even released it yet, but they were forming and done. And then, of course, now the Saudi Film Commission, Commission is out. And but I think both of those showed the potential, and I'm hoping we continue with that trend and start seeing a lot more films that will come from here and be done locally, and have this nice mix. And we've seen some more mix films come.
I mean, the good thing is nowadays you don't have to take your material outside. We also have the Red Sea Film Festival, so how was your experience? Just as someone who's been a pioneer in the industry, to see the Red Sea Film Festival come and happen in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. What does it mean for the industry?
That was huge. I think anybody that has been pushing the way that myself and a few other people like Telfaz guys and some other guys have been pushing. We've talked about this for years. I mean, I've been talking about this since 2008. This is what we were dreaming of, having our own cinema industry and having films. And so I really felt that whole thing was seeing a lot of people I'd met throughout the years. And I know not that I've worked on every one of their projects, but I know how hard they've been working. They know, I think, flip side of what we've been doing, and just to kind of all kind of nod our heads and go, man, this is huge. Like, we were so happy. And I think it's the beginning of something very beautiful that I think is going to continue and to grow. And I think that's what's exciting. And I think this is just really the beginning of it's the signal of a new phase. And I think from here, it's a new cycle now we're going to grow from.
And you work a lot with Saudi talent.
Yes.
And you help teach Saudi talent. Can you tell us a little bit about what is it that you do with them, and what's that experience been like?
Well, all my projects, I always work with young Saudi. That's from the beginning. I've always worked with Saudi talent. Who a lot of them have become big shots now. But I've always tried to work with people that I see have great potential. And a lot of times I like to work with people that are, really up and, that I see could be up and coming, because I think when you see raw talent, it's exciting, and to work with that and help them get a project out the door and work together hand in hand, I think is an exciting process. So that's on a direct level. And we, like with all the projects I've done with Jude, with Born a King, with, all these other things, and even the Almost and all these things, it was always, including and having Saudis work on the project. So I think that working on projects is one way. Then of course, I've been providing courses on, lately I've been doing a lot more style of like a film course on kind of developing, kind of pitches and doing development on your concept and that kind of thing, which I think is an essential area to kind of understand also the international film industry and the Saudi industry, and then how to make projects that work with both. And same with as you know, I also do theater. I've done the first large-scale immersive theater here in Saudi, and I've also been giving a course on immersive kind of design to young Saudis that want to come. And then, of course, the other thing I've done for the last several years, other than like the COVID one, is is a KAUST. I've been doing a course called Cinematic Science, which I've done 3 times now, 3 years. And that's a course we teach to PhD students. And it's great because it's kind of like a guerrilla filmmaking course for them.
Okay.
And it's specifically for scientists because it's to help them get their work out there in a visual video format. So finding interesting ways to communicate their stories, because science is very important, and we need more truth in the world and more scientific. When scientists can't communicate what they're doing, everyone suffers, and so that's kind of the idea behind that. And I'm a huge believer in that. So any opportunity that I get, I love to share knowledge where I can, and the door is always open for me, especially with Saudi talent, because I just feel like there's so much. I mean, Saudi's a huge country. There's millions of, the fortunate thing between Saudi and the other Gulf states is the amount of Saudis, 20 plus million, there's a huge pool of people to choose from, I mean, so you're bound to find some gems in there. So, and then I think there's a lot.
So what differentiates the talent pool, I guess, like, if you'd have to say what makes a Saudi talent who wants to get into cinema different than others?
Okay, well, I think at the core of cinema is storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And Saudi's a very unique place for storytellers. Partially it's because I think you become stronger like a muscle through resistance. And I think pre the opening, there's been a lot of resistance to a lot of creative things. So that's actually helped creative people to have to flex their muscle and become strong. This is another reason why I believe you really need to get some of these, make sure we dig up all the talent that have been working on these things before, because you have to build strength. And there's a lot of ways that Saudis in general have had to face resistance, whether they go abroad and get resistance. So I think that helps with expression and knowing how to articulate yourself and knowing how to have a strong mind. In addition, Saudi, unlike a lot of other the rest of the Arab world, they're very self-determined when they were formed. Yeah. If you go back to World War I and the World War and the whole the way it was divided up, most other countries owe their formation to like France or Britain, right? And the way they were
colonized,
formed, the current nation state, which is how our political system's arranged. Mm-hmm. Saudi did it on its own terms. Yeah. I mean, they never owed anybody anything. Okay. And what that creates is a very self-determined people where they're not having to check in with a foreign power. So it's like when you go to Japan, it's a first world place, very directed in what they,
what their ideology is, their way of life, and how they see they want the.
You may not agree with it, but it's their own way.
Yeah, you have to respect it. I mean,
you have to respect it. And Saudi's the same way. They do their thing. They do it on their terms, and they come to their conclusion, because that's just who they are. So it's a very direct expression of who they are. And an expression of who you are is what's interesting. That is what is interesting to people. And that is why from the very beginning, and I mean not just to other Saudis, but I think internationally, this is why I strongly believe it was at the core of why Saudi can actually have a film industry that doesn't just go within Saudi. I think it can go beyond its borders. Yeah. I think internationally, because a strong voice is essential to telling a good narrative. It's like any good director. They have a strong voice there, and you need that. And I think that, that in addition to the fact that there is such a larger population in Saudi amongst other Gulf states, there's also support from the top. There's a lot of other factors, but that is at the key of it. If there wasn't a strong voice, I don't think I would be so interested in Saudis to tell stories. But I notice there's a lot of people with strong voices here, things to, interesting stories, and that there's a lot of stories also from this region. It's always historically been an area that's had a lot of stories, I think.
Well, what story from this region would you love to see turn into like a feature Hollywood movie?
I can answer this right. I've been working on the script for 12 years. It's the story of Ibn Saud.
Okay.
It is amazing. The script's ready. I just don't know how to get it approved, to be honest. But the moment I get it approved, I'm going to make it into a movie. I think it could be the most epic film because it's like a Braveheart. The Abdulaziz story, which is the founder of the current, this current nation state we're in, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia now. Mm-hmm. It's just from the get-go. It is action-packed. It's also fascinating, like on a lot of levels. emotionally, the strategy and the battles, but also the vision and the journey of having to go from basically what at one point was nothing to this what it
What it is
what
today,
his life became
Yeah.
before he died.
Wow.
And that film starts, I can tell you right now, with FDR and him meeting, and then sort of the flashback of him starting to tell his life story.
Okay.
As they go back. So that's the one I really want to tell. That to me is a very essential story to tell. It's huge.
How about we'll do our last question, in spirit of what you just gave us as a scenario. Let's just take this as Todd's flashback to, when he was a kid in the Eastern Province, and where you're having a flashback of Saudi then and now. Did you actually think we would have this kind of a cinema industry? Like, did you growing up where you're like, this is going to happen in my lifetime?
As a kid, I honestly didn't think about it. I just didn't even think. I was lucky. Aramco had cinemas
Mhm.
in Aramco. That was always there. So I used to be able to go watch movies in Aramco. That was
Right.
every Aramco knows that. They all got to watch movies.
Yeah.
Saudis and Americans, or Western expats. But it wasn't until I actually came back in 2007 when I was invited back to. I spent a lot more time outside of Aramco, and I was in Riyadh mostly. That I realized, wow, this really sucks without cinemas.
Yeah.
And I think had I spent more time outside of Aramco, I would have really. I don't know if I would have even known what cinemas, because you see them when you go to the States, and then so I probably would have said, God, I wish these would be here, and I would, but I don't think I would have imagined it. I don't know, it's pretty hard to comprehend, but I do think I always felt Saudi was a special place as a kid.
Yeah.
And I've always felt connected to here, and I've always thought that one thing that I've always been able to say about Saudi is there is a different feeling here. The people are close in a different way here. And I think that when you get wrapped into the hospitality and the way people are, it becomes a part of you. And I definitely take that with me. And I think that connection, if that feeling can be somehow spread through film, I mean, I think we've done a very good thing, with bringing cinema here. I think it's great.
All right. Well, I mean, I've had a lot of fun talking with you. I mean, I think we can do this for hours and hours and not
Yeah,
get
we
bored.
definitely could.
Especially the fact that we're talking, about cinema and there's a lot of times in our careers where we've crossed paths. While you were making Born a King almost, and now today, and so maybe in a couple of years we'll
cross paths again.
cross paths again, and
I'm
we can
pretty
talk
sure we
about like
will.
some huge cinema project that's
Yeah,
that's
by
taken
then
off.
we're hoping another evolution will be
Yeah.
happening. So that's what I'm hoping.
Okay, well, I think I'm hoping that it's going to be the action movie that I'm going to talk to you about after the show.
Bada bing, bada boom.
All right. Well, we're out of time, and I'd like to thank you very much for being with us, Todd. And thank you very much for tuning in. And be sure to tune in to our next episode at The Mayman Show. Bye, everyone.